My name is David. I had it all. A beautiful wife, Sarah, two bright sons, Leo and Finn, and a thriving business. My father, Richard, was my hero, my mentor. We were the perfect family, or so I thought. The night I walked in on Sarah and my father, the world went silent. It wasn't a mistake, a drunken error. It was deliberate, calculated, a betrayal so profound it ripped a hole in my universe. But that was just the beginning. The truly monstrous truth lay hidden, buried under years of lies, waiting to consume me. A few years before, I'd been in a terrible car accident, a coma, 6 months of my life erased. When I woke up, Sarah and my father were inseparable, my unwavering pillars of support. They told me they got through it together, comforting each other while I fought for my life. I was grateful, blindly grateful. After that night of discovery, the infidelity, a cold dread settled in. Sarah's excuses, my father's feigned remorse, none of it added up. But the boys, Leo was 5, Finn was 3. My accident had been 5 years ago. A sickening math began to unfold in my head. I needed answers. Quietly, meticulously, I arranged for DNA tests for my sons. The results arrived in a sealed envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Negative. For both boys, they weren't mine. My father's name was on the document as the biological parent. My sons, the boys I had loved, nurtured, and believed were my flesh and blood, were my half-brothers, conceived while I lay unconscious, helpless in a hospital bed. The shock didn't break me, it sharpened me. The grief, the rage, I channeled it into a single burning purpose. Revenge, but not a loud, dramatic confrontation. No, their betrayal was a slow, agonizing poison, and so would be my retribution. I would watch them lose everything, just as they had stolen everything from me. I was the CEO of our family business, a multi-million-dollar company. My father was a major shareholder, but I controlled the day-to-day operations, the intricate web of investments. Sarah had a trust fund from our marriage, assets, a comfortable life built on my love. They thought they had outsmarted me. They had underestimated a man with nothing left to lose. I started moving pieces, slowly, carefully, diverting funds, restructuring shell companies, leveraging assets all legally, expertly under their noses. I made it look like strategic business decisions, complex tax maneuvers. My father, blinded by his arrogance and distracted by his new family with Sarah, never questioned it. Sarah, blissfully ignorant, continued to spend, believing her life was secure. 6 months later, the trap was set. I called a board meeting. My father, expecting a routine update, walked in confidently. Sarah, I had made sure she was there for maximum impact. I presented the new company structure, the optimized asset distribution. Their faces, at first confused, slowly contorted into horror. Their shares were worthless, their trusts empty, the properties they thought were hers gone. Everything they had built on my back, on my trust, had been meticulously, legally rerouted. They were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the bitter taste of their own deceit. The boys, I had ensured they would be cared for, placed in a new home, away from the toxicity. I took nothing from them. They were innocent, my brothers. They tried to fight it, of course. Lawyers, threats, pleas. But every move I made was airtight, documented, and irrefutable. They lost everything. Their reputation, their wealth, their illusion of power. My father, the man I once admired, was utterly broken. Sarah, the woman I once loved, was ruined. It wasn't victory that filled me, but a cold, quiet sense of justice. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine was an ice age. I walked away from the wreckage, a man stripped bare but reborn.
I lost a father, a wife, and what I thought were my sons. But I found my strength, my truth, and a future I would build on my own terms. After the dust settled, I realized that staying in the same city was like living in a museum of my own trauma. I sold the remaining stakes of the company, not out of defeat, but to achieve total liquidity and freedom. Then when I was busy licking my wounds, the most profound shift happened with Leo and Finn. Once the sickening math stopped being a weapon of war, I looked at them and saw two innocent children who had also been betrayed by their parents. I didn't just ensure they were cared for. I became their legal guardian and the only stable father figure they ever knew. Years later, the truth was shared with them in a way that emphasized my choice to love them. They didn't grow up as the products of an affair. They grew up as the sons of a man who chose them over and over again. The title brother or son mattered less than the bond of unconditional protection and love. We later, me and the boys, moved into a coastal town where nobody knew us, CEO David, or Tragic David. I started a small private investment firm dedicated to funding medical research, specifically for coma recovery and patient advocacy. My work ensured that other vulnerable people in hospital beds had legal and social safeguards, turning my period of helplessness into a shield for others. It was there, through my advocacy work, that I met Elena. She was a neurologist, a woman who valued truth above all else, because her world was built on facts and healing. With Elena, there were no secrets. The cold dread I carried for years finally thawed. For the first time, I experienced a partnership based on mutual respect, rather than pillars of support built on lies. I realized that Sarah hadn't just stolen 5 years of my life. She had been a placeholder for the person I were actually meant to find. 10 years after that fateful board meeting, I am sitting on a deck overlooking the ocean. Leo and Finn are teenagers, laughing as they try to surf. They look at me with a devotion that isn't tied to DNA, but to the fact that I chose them. My father and Sarah are ghosts of the past, people I haven't thought about in years. Their power over my emotions completely extinguished. I am no longer sharpened by rage. I am now softened by peace. I realized that my revenge didn't just destroy their lives. It cleared the ground so I could plant a garden that was actually real. I didn't just survive the ice age, I brought the spring. The conversation with Leo and Finn. As the boys grew, I never lied to them, remember? But I waited until they were mature enough to handle the weight of the truth. The day finally came when Leo turned 18. I took them both out to the cliffs overlooking the ocean, the place where I had finally found my peace. I sat them down and laid out the facts, not with the bitterness of the man who had been betrayed, but with the clarity of a man who had survived. I told them about the accident, the coma, and the documents. Leo was silent for a long time. Finn, always the more emotive one, had tears in his eyes. Finn asked the question that had likely haunted their subconscious for years. If we aren't your sons, why did you stay? Why did you fight for us? I looked at them, two young men I had taught to ride bikes, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, and whose heartbreaks I'd coached them through. I told them, biology is an accident of nature, but family is a choice. On the day I had found out the truth, I had a choice to see you as reminders of a betrayal, or to see you as two boys who were just as much victims of those lies as I was. I chose to be your father because, in that hospital bed when I was fighting to wake up, it was the thought of your faces that brought me back. That didn't change just because a piece of paper said something different. You aren't my half-brothers to me. You are my sons, not by blood, but by every sunrise we've watched together. Leo, usually the stoic one, stood up and hugged me with a strength that nearly knocked the breath out of me. He whispered, "You're the only father we've ever had. We don't care about the rest." In that moment, the last lingering shadow of Richard and Sarah vanished. By telling them the truth, I took away the power of the secret. I realized that my revenge had reached its ultimate conclusion. I had raised good men in spite of the people who created them. The legacy of the new David Leo went on to study law, specializing in family advocacy, inspired by the way I protected their rights during the restructuring. Finn became a marine biologist, finding his own peace in the same ocean that helped heal me. I eventually started a new venture with them, a legacy built on transparency and ethics. It became more successful than the original company ever was, because it wasn't built on the intricate webs of my father's era, but on the solid ground of my own integrity. On my 60th birthday, I stood in a room filled with laughter. Elena was by my side, and my sons were there with families of their own. I looked at a photo of myself from the day of the board meeting, the man with the ice age in his eyes, and I barely recognized him. The story didn't end with me getting even. It ended with a man who got happy, who didn't just win. Reminder that in most cases, the deepest betrayals often come from the closest circles. What would you have done if you were me? Was the revenge justified, or did I go too far? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Storytime Lab, real stories, raw truths, no filters. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more profound human experiences. If you have a true story you believe needs to be shared, send it to us.